everyone's talking about, well, is it possible to have a long-term view of the way publishing is going to go, or are we just in a reactionary phase, and some of it's, a mix of someone having a good idea and someone having a bit of a knee-jerk reaction and going, oh, we should be doing this. Thoughts?
I mean, there is definitely, every publisher, one of the new things I can tell you about today is our new romance digital imprint. Exactly, another one. All publishers are going, oh, digital first, let's give that a go. And there's just so much of that happening, and it's a real, blossoming of all of these new imprints and new ways of going about things. But it is just part of publishers adapting to the marketplace and to this new, ebook marketplace that we have. As we have seen physical sales going down in the last few years, and in particular, after the GFC. And I would say the last year in retail, as you would have seen, lots of shops, all types of retail closing down. We've actually been pretty lucky in terms of bookshops, I think, last year, not the year before, with Angus & Robertson and Borders. But we do need to find new ways of selling books and new avenues. So, we're looking at Random House, we're looking at, okay, how can we do more with education, and what do we need to do to help our books get into the education market? And there's just so many, the library market, and how do we, what do we need to do to work with these new ebook retailers? So we are really branching out, and sometimes it is, these days, a lot of experimentation and kind of, okay, let's try that and see if it works. Let's try doing digital short stories, so Joel might be able to talk more about, because you are an experiment, aren't you?
So the Momentum experiment, Momentum is an imprint of Macmillan that was founded. We launched at the beginning of 2012, and we had about 6 months of prep before that to get the new stuff and running. The basic premise behind it was that we were looking at the future of publishing and wondering what it was going to be. We were worried about the decline of print and what that meant for publishing new authors. We have, at Macmillan, a number of very, very big Australian authors who make a lot of money for the company. And what we were worried about wasn't so much them, it was the mid-list, which is the vast bulk of authors, some of whom are going to eventually jump up into that top tier and earn a lot of money for the company, and therefore justify the existence of the rest of the list. And some of whom are never going to get there, but they're going to keep getting published. If you can't publish that many mid-list people, eventually you're going to run into trouble as a publishing house, where you don't have a pool of talent to draw from to get someone talented enough to justify the whole list. Like a lot of other businesses, publishing is very much an 80-20 model, or sometimes 90-10, where a very small percentage of the actual people being published are making the bulk of the money. And we were worried what was going to happen. So we thought, how can we get around this? And one of the ways we came up with that was to found Momentum. So Momentum's aim is to publish a mix of previously published authors that may have been published years and years and years in the past, out of copyright, out of print, and new authors that we think will work in the digital market. And when we started, that was a very big mix of non-fiction. So Russell mentioned we published Chopper's books at the beginning of 2012 that were previously published. We published a lot of mix of non-fiction, fiction, and a lot of new authors. This year we have ended up focusing a lot more on non-fiction. A lot more on genre fiction, because we found that essentially people online are more likely to find that type of book if they're looking for a new author, and they build up an alliance or brand affiliation with an author if they're writing in a genre that they're already familiar with. And that mix of different things that we're trying out to try and find those audiences online is part of what the experiment is. I think that's kind of the future. The future of publishing will be smaller parts of companies experimenting with different things until you find something that works and makes enough money to continue going. That's on the publishing side. Yeah, no, it'll change us again. But yeah, I guess that's where we're at.
Well, I was going to say that's what's good about self-publishing. A big company can take a while to get its act together to do things. As a self-published author, I can immediately see what's working to sell my book and what's not, because I have direct access to my sales figures. I can change my price if I need to. I can run a sale. There's a lot of things you can be proactive about when you're self-publishing that might take, and if a publisher has quite a few authors, they may not be concentrating on you for a certain period while they're trying to work out what they're doing with other people, whereas I have that immediate access to change what I want, which is a positive thing. And something you kind of mentioned is you're trying to sell the author now, so as a self-published author, you are selling yourself as much as you are selling your book. So if you're not online talking to people on Twitter or on Facebook, having your blog, being a guest blogger on someone else's blog, doing interviews, no one's going to know you're there. Like I saw quite a few books just from talking to people on Twitter. They're like, oh, what have you written? And I tell them, oh, I'm going to go and buy that, and off they go. So it's very important to have a professional and a pleasant persona online. Don't do things online that you wouldn't do in person. Seen some shocking things, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And actually, I think what's interesting about us is that there's a traditional publisher on some level and a new type of publisher and self-publisher. And I think we're going to find more authors falling in between those categories and possibly subcategories within between those. And I think for Momentum at least, the authors that we're picking up that have been the most successful have been authors who are kind of self-starting. And they could have self-published, but they chose to go with us because we're going to pay for their editing, the cover, we're going to pay for some of that stuff. We're going to get it up and running. We have a bit of experience with doing what we're doing, but I know a lot of my authors could have self-published, just that they chose not to for whatever reason. And I think that that's a really good thing. I think that you should have options to choose the mix of things that you like.
So have you got any plans there to get Chopper read out their guest blog?
Oh, Chopper was
Chopper on Facebook, Chopper on Twitter.
Chopper was interviewed on Sunrise right after we launched his books, and we have tried to explain to him what an ebook was. And he got on Sunrise and he goes, I don't know, they put my books out there, they're on a computer or something, I don't know why anyone would want to do that. Great first TV appearance for one of our authors.
But I think that's a good point with what you were saying and with the Chopper story, which is that so much is changing in marketing as well. And what we can do, and so what these guys probably would have done, knowing that Chopper was on TV, is with the e-retailers, you can call them up and say, hey, quick, authors on TV, put a promotion up, and they're pretty good, getting better, and some of the retailers at doing that. So you can be a lot faster with things. We can publish faster, especially with E these days, than the kind of traditional model of needing at least 12 months. And there are good reasons still to have that model because it's all about kind of having those advanced campaigns and publicity and sales, making sure we have the stock. Sometimes printing overseas, but it's great to have the options, for us and for authors to be able to publish faster if we need to, and to be able to put quick promotions in place.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the things that we're looking for a lot now is authors who have multiple titles. So series work really well. In digital, people read one, they immediately will read the second one in the series if it's there. If it's not there, they may have forgotten who you are by the time the next book comes out a year later. So that model is more difficult to swing where you're waiting. In digital only stuff at least. I think in print there's a lot more prestige to it, there's a lot more money being spent on getting the word out about the books. And so it's easier for people to get the word out about those books because they're stacked up in bookstores. But if you don't have that, then you need to rely on that first point of discovery and keeping people on the hook the whole time after that.